This is a description, our second war of independence. That's how Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu describes the ground war against Hamas that's now underway in Gaza.
The war is inciting anti-Semitism in other parts of the world. Yesterday, an angry mob in the Russian Republic of Dagestan surrounded a plane full of Jews fleeing the war. CBN Middle East Bureau Chief Chris Mitchell has that story.
Israel is fighting on four fronts. In Gaza, the I.D.F. released footage of its methodical ground invasion of the Gaza Strip as it continues its air bombardment of Hamas infrastructure. On the northern border, the military continues to attack Hezbollah installations. For days, Hezbollah and the I.D.F. have traded rockets, artillery, and anti-tank missiles. In Syria, Israeli warplanes attacked a site that shot missiles toward Israel. And in the West Bank, Israel struck a terrorist squad inside the city of Jenin. In a televised news conference Saturday night, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu told Israelis that Israel has opened a new phase in the war.
The war inside the Gaza Strip will be long and difficult, and we are ready for it. This is our second war for independence. We will fight for our native land. We will fight and won't back down. It will be the victory of good over bad, of light over darkness, of life over death.
Netanyahu also highlighted the role of Iran in the attacks. He said 90% of Hamas's military budget comes from Iran, and that without Iran, there's no Hamas or Hezbollah. Also this weekend, the Prime Minister met with the relatives of the hostages. Many of the families are worried the ground invasion will endanger the hostages and support a prisoner swap to free their loved ones. Netanyahu pledged to work as hard as he could to rescue those hostages, saying the government would exercise and exhaust every possibility to bring them home. The official number of hostages is now 239.
It's an unbelievable number, 239 kidnapped. Among the kidnapped are citizens, foreign workers, not a small number whose identities and reaching their families is complex for us, and it takes time to build this picture. Hence, the number that I mentioned, 239.
Meanwhile, the UN warns civil order is breaking down in Gaza after thousands of people broke into UN warehouses and took food and water. The fallout from the war is spreading to the nations. In Dagestan, Russia, an anti-Semitic mob stormed an airport where a plane from Tel Aviv landed. The crowd hunting Jews fleeing the war in Israel, eventually going onto the tarmac and surrounding the plane. Israel's ambassador to Russia is looking for safe passage for them, and the chief rabbi of Dagestan says about 400 Jewish families may need to be evacuated. The Prime Minister's and Foreign Ministry released a statement saying, the state of Israel takes seriously attempts to harm Israeli citizens and Jews everywhere. Israel expects the Russian law enforcement authorities to protect the safety of all Israeli citizens and Jews, wherever they may be. Russia's ambassador to Israel, Anatoly Viktorov, was summoned this morning to a protest call at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in Jerusalem, following the visit of the Hamas delegation to Moscow. And in Turkey, Turkish President Recep Erdogan called Hamas a liberation group and labeled Israel a war criminal for its actions inside Gaza.
It's absolutely incredible to hear Hamas being styled as some kind of liberation group. It's an Islamic death cult. They would rather die. They have said publicly, one of their spokesmen, we have an advantage over Israel. They love life. Well, what do we love to do? We love to martyr ourselves in trying to defeat Israel and drive it into the sea. Look at what they're saying. They're saying that Israel is some kind of genocidal state. What they're doing is accusing Israel of the very thing that they are trying to do. They are trying to drive Israel into the sea. They have already stated it in their covenant, the Hamas covenant, when they were formed almost 20 years ago, that our goal is the eradication of the Jewish people, not just in Israel, but around the world. When you see these headlines, here's Russia accusing now Israel of war crimes. Here's Turkey saying we are going to enter the war. Here's Iran saying you may have crossed a red line. You're about to cross a red line. Don't do that or we're going to enter the war. When you see these things, look at Ezekiel chapter 38. Do I think this is coming to pass today? No, but I do think the ideas are being planted that will someday give fruit to what is just absolutely horrific, that the nations of the world will gather against Israel. Here it is from Ezekiel 38, verse 10. Thus says the Lord God, on that day it shall come to pass that thoughts will arise in your mind, and you will make an evil plan. What is the evil plan being constructed today? Quite obviously with Hamas, quite obviously with all the anti-Semitic activity happening worldwide, the face of evil is being revealed. But underneath that is a very subtle plan and a very devious plan, and that is to bring in the International Court of Justice. Their prosecutor right now is on the ground in southern Gaza, and he's making evaluations on whether or not Israel is committing war crimes. They're not going to charge Hamas. Hamas is a government. It governs Gaza, and it launched a horrific attack against Israel. They're not going to accuse Hamas of war crimes. They're going to accuse Israel. And they're going to get the full force of the UN behind that to try to make Israel into some kind of war crime state, try its prime minister, its officials, make sure that they can't travel, try to cut Israel off from trade. That is the devious plan that is being hatched today. As Christians, we need to stand with Israel. We need to say, no, you don't get to do this. Absent what is written in the Bible, Israel has a right to exist under international law. That's what the League of Nations decided after World War I. That's what the UN decided after World War II. It's part of international law. The Jewish people have an absolute right to self-determination. They also have an absolute right under international law to defend themselves. Let's stand with Israel because it's the right thing to do. Well, Chris Mitchell joins us now from Jerusalem. Chris, we're not seeing a traditional invasion of tanks and troops going in. What is the Israeli military buildup now in Gaza, and how does this fit with a long-term strategy?
Well, right now, Gordon, actually, as we speak, they're dividing the Gaza Strip in two. You have Gaza City in the north and Khan Yunis and the other places in the south. I think what they're doing right now, Gordon, is that they're moving deliberately, step by step. Just last week, they went in one night, they came out, they went another night, they came out. The third night, they went in, and that began the invasion. They're moving deliberately because, remember, Hamas has been preparing this for years. They have tunnels, they have booby traps, ambushes, all set up. And Israel last went into Gaza back in 2014, so they've learned a lot since then. And also, because of the deliberation, they want to minimize casualties on both sides. And so Israel's seen enough dead family members here in the last few weeks. They want to minimize the casualties to the I.D.F. And certainly they want to minimize casualties in Gaza. They're still telling Palestinians to leave northern Gaza and go south, even though they're doing that by leaflets and calling people, even though Hamas is sometimes preventing these people to leave, even at gunpoint. So they want to use the Palestinians there as human shields. If God forbid, the Israelis, I.D.F., hit more civilians, then they want to use that as propaganda. So that's part of the deliberation going on right now, Gordon.
Well, Iran is warning that Israel is crossing red lines. How does that increase the likelihood of another front? Is Iran still going to use proxies like Hezbollah, or are they going to actively get involved in a war?
Well, that's the question right now. So many people are asking. Certainly, if you listen to their rhetoric, it's very inflammatory. But I guess more importantly is to look actually what their actions are on the northern border. Ever since the beginning of this war with Hamas, there's been a lot of back and forth between Hezbollah and the I.D.F. But whether or not, the question is, will Hezbollah enter the war on a major scale? Because remember, they have 150 to 200,000 rockets, and they're precision guided. They could hit almost anywhere in Israel. And the thought was, once Israel went into the Gaza Strip, that maybe Hezbollah would enter the war. So So far, it hasn't happened. It's possible that Iran's statements are just bluster, and they don't necessarily want to expend their long-term investment, which would be billions of dollars in many, many years into Hezbollah. But on the other hand, Gordon, maybe after Israel has turned their attention to Hamas, maybe they'll turn their attention to Hezbollah in the north.
Well, let's look at something that is absolutely astounding to me. A mob storming an airport in Russia, surrounding a plane full of Israelis from Tel Aviv. How concerned is the Israeli government that we'll see more scenes like this around the world?
Gordon, I think the Israeli government is very concerned about it, and I think the whole Jewish world is concerned about it. Not only you saw that in Dagestan, you've seen it also, thousands, tens of thousands marching in the streets of London. In major cities, you see incidents, Jewish students that were locked in a library in New York with pro-Hamas students pounding on the door. And so this battle is actually being faced not only here in the Gaza Strip or in the northern border, but literally all over the world. And with these crowds, they were just chanting. They wanted to find the Jews, almost like they were predators and seeking any Jews they could find. They were going through the airport. They were surrounding the airplane. The chief rabbi of that area calls for all those 400 plus some families to leave. And I think there's a lot of people right now that are considering their safety, a lot of Jews, whether it's in the U.S., Europe, Russia, where's going to be a safe place. Many are saying you should come back to Israel, even though there's a war right now going on.
Well, I would encourage him to go back to Israel. God will watch over him, and he's been doing that for a long period of time. As we look at these things, it seems like the Haman has been released in our generation, and now more than ever, we need to stand with Israel. Chris, thanks for the insight, and thanks for joining with us.